Good morning, and thank you, Simon, for the introduction. My work actually follows on from that perfectly because I'm going to be talking about different definitions of sustainability as well. My name's Katherine. I am a social scientist, and I work in the field of energy. And I'm going to be talking about what my work might tell us about how we can design appropriate homes for the future. And again, thank you, Simon, for kind of teeing up that focus on the climate emergency as well, so bringing that into the context. So before I go on to talking about domestic energy, I just want to pause and think about this couple. When they're looking for a home, maybe they're thinking about the spare room they're going to have for a home office now that they've experienced lockdown and being in a really tight space. They know that's really important to their home. Or maybe in a few years they intend to have kids, so they need a few extra bedrooms for where they're going to be, and they imagine a big dining room where they'll all be having their family meals. So I think it's important to remember that we don't consume energy. That's not how we think about it. We actually have to think about the practices and the lifestyle expectations that energy support. So, zooming back out though to energy, if we looked at energy demand and how it's changed in the UK over the last 50 years, you might be surprised, or you might not be if you're more pessimistic like me, to see that our energy consumption, which is that orange line, has stayed about the same. And you can see actually there has been a decoupling and downward trend in some other sectors. And the reason it's stayed the same is what I want to talk about today. And so this is despite the fact that we've seen huge advances in technology. We've built, we've made our houses much more better insulated. We've improved the windows, got central heating, and again, made those more efficient. And this is not to say, you've probably seen Insulate Britain in the news. This is not to say we couldn't do more with the building fabric and thinking about what we can change to the house. The UK actually has one of the oldest, leakiest housing stocks in Europe. So there's certainly more that can be done. But I think it raises a point that actually technology is not the whole answer. So when you're thinking about house design, it can't just be about the physical building. Again, we have to think about what people want from their homes. So why have we failed to reduce energy demand from the housing stock? I would say it's because technological solutions do not challenge lifestyle expectations. And that's what I want to talk more about. So again, if we think back 50 years ago, actually what we used energy for is different, and it changes. We have a lot more appliances than we did 50 years ago. Actually, we eat out more, so we use less energy in our own homes because that energy can be consumed elsewhere. But what I really want to draw attention to on this graph is that heating is the main use of our energy in homes. It's about 2/3. And while we've got, again, better insulation, better windows, better central heating, we actually, instead of maybe all being in one room together and staying warm, we expect to heat the whole house. Someone's going to be off in their room and being able to study. Or there's actually been indoor climate change. So over the last 50 years, we've seen a 6-degree increase in indoor temperatures. And in many ways, that's good, right? We don't want people in moldy old houses, and we don't want them, shivering. But it's recognizing that, like, a technological change also changes the way we live in those spaces and what we expect from our homes. So technological interventions aren't sufficient on their own. So how do we intervene in social aspects of energy demand? This has gotten me really focused actually on trends that are outside of our control. And one thing in particular actually is about declining household sizes. So again, if we went back to the 1960s, so 60 years ago, you'll see from that top blue bar in orange that maybe about 40% of households were either living alone or with one other person. And today you can see that's actually much higher. And this is a global trend. So as countries develop, household size typically declines. In the UK, that's about 30%, and in Scandinavian countries, that's 40% of people living on their own. So what this actually means when we think about energy is there's also evidence of increasing floor area per capita. And if heating is the main use for demand in your home, then actually having more space that we expect to heat can help undo that trend of improvements in efficiency bringing our demand down, but actually more space and expectations to have more space can counterbalance that. So if we look at what research says about house size and energy demand, we see that actually a very large house built to a high efficiency standard actually consumes more energy than a small house built to a low efficiency standard. There was one study in Australia that looked at this because houses just keep getting built bigger and bigger with more bedrooms, that over a 6-year period, despite efficiency standards improving, the actual demand or efficiency overall, because of the growth in house size, went down by 38% over a 6-year period. So I think sometimes when we get so focused on the technical interventions and the physical house that we overlook these other changing expectations that also influence energy consumption. So I have 3 sort of solutions to start thinking about how you intervene in social and the material aspects of our home. And one of these is to really think about, if people are going to stay in their homes, how do you make that house more flexible? And how, if, say, you have people move out, they have kids and their kids leave and have grown up and are getting their own jobs, could you perhaps design houses that are more flexible so a lodger could come and move in? So this footprint is an example of that, where actually the garage and the master bedroom can be segregated off. So I think it's interesting to think about, even if household sizes are declining, how can we make housing more collective? And something that's always really stood out to me, or baffled me even, is the evidence of how much more collective housing and our lifestyles used to be. So in 1850, the British census includes family being people who are constantly in the house and accidentally in the house. And I think that just hints at a very different sort of lifestyle than I've at least grown up with. I wouldn't necessarily expect so many other people to be coming in and out of our homes. So I think another example of this is actually, if we're not expecting people to just stay where they are. Imagine this woman's had grown-up children and they've moved out for quite a while, and she's had all these spare bedrooms and she's finally ready to downsize. We also need to have a housing stock that allows people to downsize. In the UK, this is actually quite often a problem. Of course, moving house is a really big deal. It's not just the physical building. Again, you're part of a community and a network. And so having somewhere that you can move to that might still meet those needs is a complicated point. But actually, we find that there isn't available 1-person or 2-person accommodation. So a German study found that there was 2 to 3 times as many 1-person households as 1 to 2-person flats. So again, we also need to think about what we're building to meet changing demographics. And then the third example is actually, how do we make high density housing desirable and comfortable? And this is something that I've experienced personally recently as well, just having really noisy neighbors when you can hear their music or them stomping around. I think, your home is a place that you want control and privacy and a sense of your own space. And actually, poor soundproofing has been seen as one of the most common complaints and reasons for why people might want to move to a detached house. And so actually, you might not think that soundproofing has anything to do with energy, but you can kind of see how there is a connection there, because it's a part of allowing us to live in much more dense, blocks of flats than everyone needing their separate home. So there's a lot of different ways we could keep going on about how we look at those social aspects and not just thinking about the physical house when we're intervening in energy demand. And I think it's important, though, to kind of bring us all back to, if we're thinking about the climate emergency and issues of equity, there's also a question of what is a sufficient lifestyle. So we saw with the lockdowns, actually, there's a trend of people wanting to move out of the cities. And quite often we see this, again, we might have an improvement in efficiency, or we have renewable technologies, and we think we can just keep going the way we are. But I think it's important to actually recognize that this house and this image might not be appropriate for the 70% of the population who are living on their own or with one other person. So it's really important to start asking questions about what is a sufficient lifestyle and how are our populations changing. We have an aging population, declining household sizes. What housing do they really need to meet their basic quality of life and also respond to the climate crisis and avoid runaway climate change? Thank you very much for your time.